I'm sitting in my car outside Lincoln Elementary School, and my hands are still shaking. It's been 3 weeks since that assembly, but I can still hear the silence that filled that auditorium when my 8-year-old son walked up to the microphone and said the words that changed everything. My dad isn't here because he's in prison for hurting my mom. You know that moment when your world shifts and you realize that everything you thought you were doing right was actually wrong? That's what happened to me that day. But let me back up and tell you how we got there, because this story isn't just about one brave little boy. It's about how sometimes our children are stronger than we ever imagined, and how the truth, even when it's painful, can set us all free. My name is Maya Chen, and I'm a single mom to the most incredible 8-year-old boy named Ethan. For the past year, I've been working as a night shift nurse at Mercy General Hospital here in Columbus, Ohio. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps us in our little 2-bedroom apartment on the quiet side of town. Most importantly, it's given us a fresh start, something we desperately needed after everything we'd been through. Ethan is the kind of kid who notices everything. He's got these deep brown eyes that seem to see right through you, and he's always been wise beyond his years. Maybe too wise. He loves building with Legos, reading books about space, and he's got this infectious laugh that can light up any room. But there's something else about Ethan. He's been carrying a secret that no 8-year-old should have to carry. You see, Ethan's father, David, isn't just absent from our lives. He's not away on business trips or deployed overseas like I'd been telling people. David is currently serving a 3-year sentence in Marion Correctional Institution for domestic violence, specifically for what he did to me on a cold February night that ended with me in the emergency room and him in handcuffs. I thought I was protecting Ethan by creating this elaborate story about his father being away for work. I'd tell the teachers, the other parents, anyone who asked, that David was a consultant who traveled frequently. I even went so far as to make up business trips and send fake postcards that I'd write myself. I convinced myself that this was love, that shielding my son from the truth about his father's violence was what any good mother would do. But what I didn't realize was that Ethan remembered more than I thought he did. He was 6 when it happened, and I assumed the trauma had faded from his memory. I was wrong. While I was busy crafting lies to protect him, he was creating his own stories to protect me, and to protect himself from the shame he thought he should feel. The thing about secrets is that they have a way of growing heavier over time. For months, Ethan had been telling increasingly elaborate stories at school about his father. He'd talk about how his dad was a pilot who flew to different countries, how he was too busy with important work to come to school events, how he sent presents from exotic places. His teacher, Miss Sarah Rodriguez, had started to notice inconsistencies in these stories. The other children were beginning to ask questions, and the school administrators were starting to wonder what was really going on in our home. Principal Margaret Foster, a well-meaning woman in her 50s who'd been running Lincoln Elementary for over a decade, had called me in for a meeting. She sat across from me in her office, surrounded by children's artwork and motivational posters, and told me that she was concerned about Ethan's behavior. "He's seeking attention," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Children who lie about their family situations are usually dealing with something deeper." I remember feeling defensive, angry even. How dare she suggest that I wasn't handling my son's needs properly? I was doing everything I could to give him a normal childhood, to protect him from the stigma and judgment that comes with having a father in prison. But as I sat there listening to her concerns, a small voice in the back of my mind started to whisper that maybe, just maybe, I was the one who had gotten it all wrong. That conversation happened on a Tuesday. By the following Thursday, everything would change. Because sometimes it takes the pure honesty of a child to show us adults what courage really looks like. 3 months before that life-changing assembly, I genuinely believed that Ethan and I had finally found our rhythm. We'd been living in Columbus for almost a year, and for the first time since leaving our old life behind, I felt like we were actually thriving instead of just surviving. Our morning routine had become sacred to me. I'd wake up at 6:30, make Ethan's favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese and toast cut into triangles because he insisted they tasted better that way, and we'd sit at our little kitchen table talking about his plans for the day. He'd tell me about the books he was reading, the science experiments his teacher had planned, or the new friend he'd made at recess. These conversations were everything to me because they felt so beautifully normal. "Mom, did you know that Saturn has 62 moons?" he asked me one particular morning in September, his eyes lighting up as he shared this fascinating fact he'd learned from his library book about space. "I had no idea," I replied, genuinely amazed by his curiosity. "Which one is your favorite?" "Titan," he said without hesitation. "It's the biggest one, and scientists think it might have an ocean under its surface. Maybe there are aliens there." These were the moments that made all the difficult nights worth it. Working 12-hour shifts at the hospital was exhausting, but seeing Ethan excited about learning, watching him make friends, and hearing him laugh again, it felt like we'd finally escaped the shadow of our past. I'd carefully constructed what I thought was the perfect explanation for David's absence. When other parents asked about Ethan's father at school pickup, I'd smile and say, "Oh, David's in consulting. He travels constantly for work, different cities every week. It's great for his career, but we miss him." I'd even created a fake business card that I kept in my wallet just in case anyone asked too many questions. The lie felt necessary because I'd seen how people looked at families like ours in our old neighborhood. The whispered conversations when they thought I couldn't hear, the way some parents would subtly pull their children away from Ethan during playdates once they learned about our situation. I was determined to give my son a chance at a normal childhood, free from the judgment and pity that seemed to follow families affected by domestic violence. But as autumn settled in, I started noticing small changes in Ethan's behavior that made my stomach twist with worry. He'd always been a chatty kid, eager to share details about his day, but suddenly, he was becoming more reserved when I asked about school. His teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had mentioned during our October parent-teacher conference that while Ethan was academically excellent, he seemed to withdraw during class discussions about families. He's particularly quiet when we talk about family traditions or when the children share stories about their parents, she told me, her voice gentle but concerned. I've tried to encourage him to participate, but he just sits there looking uncomfortable. The most heartbreaking change was how Ethan had started asking questions that I wasn't prepared to answer. One evening, while I was helping him with his homework, he looked up from his math worksheet and asked, "Mom, why doesn't Dad ever call us?" I felt my chest tighten. "You know how busy he is with work, sweetheart. His schedule is really unpredictable." "But Tommy's dad travels for work too, and he calls Tommy every night from his hotel," Ethan replied, his voice small and uncertain. I scrambled for an explanation. "Well, Dad's job is different. He's often in places where the phone service isn't very good." Ethan nodded, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't entirely convinced. These conversations were becoming more frequent, and each one felt like I was building a wall between us, made of lies I thought were protecting him. The breaking point came during the school's annual Halloween carnival. I watched from across the gymnasium as Ethan stood alone by the ring toss game, observing other children with their fathers. A little girl named Emma ran up to her dad, showing off the plastic spider she'd won, and he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as she giggled with delight. I saw something shift in Ethan's expression as he watched them. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was something deeper. It was the look of a child who was beginning to understand that his family was fundamentally different from everyone else's, and he was starting to question why. That night, as I tucked him into bed, Ethan asked me the question that would eventually unravel everything. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever come home?" The vulnerability in his voice broke my heart. I realized that my carefully constructed story wasn't protecting him. It was confusing him and making him feel like something was wrong with our family. But I still wasn't ready to tell him the truth. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was restocking supplies in the cardiac unit. My phone buzzed, and I saw Lincoln Elementary on the caller ID. My heart immediately started racing because schools don't usually call unless something's wrong. "Maya, this is Sarah Rodriguez, Ethan's teacher. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Her voice sounded strained, like she'd been wrestling with whether to make this call. I stepped into an empty patient room, my hands already trembling. "Of course. Is everything okay? Is Ethan hurt?" No, he's fine physically," she said quickly. But Maya, I need to talk to you about something that's been happening in class. Ethan has been telling some very detailed stories about his father, and I'm starting to worry that he might be struggling with something deeper. My mouth went dry. What kind of stories? Well, yesterday during our career day discussion, he told the entire class that his father was a commercial airline pilot who flies to Japan twice a month. He described the cockpit in remarkable detail and even mentioned specific aircraft models. When I asked him more questions, he said his dad was coming to our upcoming career fair to talk about aviation. I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach. I see. Maya, that's not all. Last week, he told his reading group that his father was teaching him to fly small planes on the weekends. And during our family heritage project, he wrote an entire page about flying to Hawaii with his dad over the summer. The details were so vivid that I almost believed it myself. I leaned against the wall, feeling dizzy. Ms. Rodriguez, I can explain. I'm not finished, she interrupted gently. Today, during lunch, another student asked Ethan why his dad never comes to school events if he's around so much. Ethan got very defensive and told the boy that his father was actually a test pilot for the military and that his work was classified. When I tried to talk to him about it later, he became upset and said he didn't want to discuss his father anymore. The weight of what I'd created was crushing me. I never meant for this to happen. Maya, I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've seen children create stories for all kinds of reasons. But Ethan's stories are becoming more elaborate and contradictory. The other children are starting to notice, and some of them are asking me questions I don't know how to answer. That evening, I tried to have a gentle conversation with Ethan about his day, but he was unusually quiet. When I asked about his friends, he just shrugged and said, "Some kids think I'm weird." Why would they think that, sweetheart? Because I can't answer their questions about Dad, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They want to know why he never comes to anything, and I don't know what to tell them anymore. 2 days later, I received a call that made my blood run cold. It was Principal Foster, and her tone was serious. Maya, I need you to come in for a meeting tomorrow morning. We need to discuss Ethan's behavior and some concerns that have been brought to my attention. I arranged to switch shifts with another nurse and showed up at the school the next morning with my stomach in knots. Principal Foster sat across from me in her office, a file folder open in front of her. Maya, I'll be direct with you. We've had several incidents this week involving Ethan and his stories about his father. Yesterday, he told a substitute teacher that his dad was a Navy SEAL and couldn't attend parent-teacher conferences because he was on a secret mission. When she asked him about it, he became very agitated. I felt tears starting to form. Mrs. Foster, I'm not judging you, she said, holding up her hand. But I am concerned. Children who create elaborate fantasies about absent parents are often dealing with trauma or abandonment issues. Ethan is clearly struggling with something, and these stories are his way of coping. She leaned forward, her expression softening. Maya, I need to ask you directly. Is Ethan's father actually involved in his life? The question hung in the air between us. I could feel the weight of all the lies I'd told, all the stories I'd created, all the times I'd chosen protection over truth. My hands were shaking as I tried to find the words. It's complicated, I finally whispered. I understand that family situations can be complex, Principal Foster replied. But Ethan is 8 years old and he's creating an entire fictional relationship with his father. This is affecting his friendships, his emotional well-being, and his ability to trust the adults in his life. She paused, then delivered the words that would haunt me. Maya, I think Ethan is seeking attention because he's trying to process something he doesn't understand. But these lies are going to catch up with him eventually. The question is, do you want to help him face the truth, or do you want him to keep living in this fantasy until it falls apart on its own? I left that meeting knowing that everything was about to change. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Principal Foster's words in my head. Do you want to help him face the truth, or do you want him to keep living in this fantasy until it falls apart on its own? I found myself standing in Ethan's doorway at 2 a.m, watching him sleep peacefully, his space-themed comforter pulled up to his chin. He looked so innocent, so small. How could I burden this beautiful child with the ugly truth about his father? But as I stood there, I remembered something my own mother had told me years ago. Maya, the truth might hurt for a moment, but lies hurt forever. The next morning, I made a decision that terrified me. Instead of rushing through our usual breakfast routine, I sat down across from Ethan with my coffee and really looked at him. "Ethan, can we talk about something important?" I asked, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. He looked up from his cereal, those perceptive brown eyes immediately alert. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble, but I think we need to have an honest conversation about Dad." I watched as his whole body tensed. He set down his spoon carefully, like he was preparing himself for something he'd been dreading. "I know you've been telling stories about him at school," I continued gently, "and I understand why you're doing it." "I'm not lying," he said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. "Ethan, look at me." I reached across the table and took his small hands in mine. "You're not in trouble for the stories, but I need you to know that it's okay to tell the truth, whatever the truth is." Something shifted in his expression. The careful mask he'd been wearing slipped just a little, and I saw a glimpse of the confusion and pain he'd been carrying. "Mom," he said quietly, "I remember things." My heart stopped. "What kind of things?" "I remember the yelling. I remember you crying. I remember the night when the police came and took Dad away." His voice was barely a whisper, but each word hit me like a physical blow. "I remember you had bandages on your face." I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. All this time, I'd been protecting him from memories he already had. "I thought if I forgot about it, it would go away," he continued. "But then kids at school started asking about Dad, and I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell them the truth because I thought it would make you sad, so I made up stories about him being cool and important." "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, pulling him into my arms. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you by not talking about it." "I just wanted to have a dad like everyone else," he said into my shoulder, "even if I had to make him up." We sat there holding each other, both of us crying, both of us finally being honest about the weight we'd been carrying separately. "Ethan, do you want to know the real reason why Dad isn't here?" I asked, when we'd both calmed down a little. He nodded, his face serious and mature beyond his years. "Dad made some very bad choices. He hurt me, and that's not okay. When someone hurts another person, especially someone they're supposed to love and protect, there are consequences. Dad is in prison because he needs to learn that his actions were wrong." "Is it my fault?" he asked, the question I'd been dreading. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "None of this is your fault. What happened between Dad and me had nothing to do with you. You are not responsible for his choices or his consequences." A week later, Ms. Rodriguez sent home a flyer about the upcoming school assembly where students could share something special about their families. I showed it to Ethan, expecting him to dismiss it immediately. Instead, he surprised me. "Mom, I want to do this." "Are you sure?" I asked. "You don't have to participate if you don't want to." "I'm tired of pretending," he said, with a determination that took my breath away. "I want to tell the truth. Will you help me figure out what to say?" That evening, we sat together at the kitchen table with a piece of paper, working on what he wanted to share. I watched in amazement as my 8-year-old son showed more courage than I'd shown in months. "I want to tell them that our family is different, but that doesn't make it wrong," he said. "I want to tell them that you're the strongest person I know and that I'm proud to be your son." "What about Dad?" I asked gently. "I want to tell them the truth," he said simply, "that he made bad choices, but that doesn't define who I am." As we worked on his speech together, I realized that Ethan had been ready for the truth all along. I was the one who hadn't been ready to trust him with it. The morning of the assembly, I woke up with my heart pounding. Ethan was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table, his speech notes in front of him, quietly reading them over and over again. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Nervous," he admitted, "but good nervous, like when you're about to do something scary but important." I knelt down beside his chair and looked into his eyes. Ethan, you know you can change your mind, right? There's no pressure to do this. He shook his head firmly. Mom, I've been thinking about it all week. I'm tired of being ashamed of something that isn't even my fault, and I'm tired of other kids thinking I'm weird because I can't answer their questions. As we walked into Lincoln Elementary that morning, I felt like I was in a dream. The hallways were buzzing with excitement as children clutched their presentation materials and parents found seats in the auditorium. I spotted Ms. Rodriguez near the entrance, and she gave me an encouraging smile. Maya, I'm so proud of Ethan for wanting to participate, she said quietly. Whatever he's decided to share, I know it comes from a place of courage. The auditorium was packed. Parents filled the first several rows, while students sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the stage. I found a seat in the back, my palms sweating, as I watched Principal Foster take the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Today our third-grade students will be sharing something special about their families. Let's give them all our attention and support. One by one, children took the stage. Emma talked about her grandmother's immigration story from Ireland. Marcus showed pictures of his military family and their moves around the world. Sophie shared about her two moms and their adoption journey. Each presentation was met with warm applause and encouraging smiles. Then I heard Principal Foster call. Next, we have Ethan Chen. My breath caught in my throat as I watched my son walk confidently across the stage. He looked so small up there, but his posture was straight and his voice was clear as he approached the microphone. Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan Chen, and I'm in Ms. Rodriguez's class. He paused, took a deep breath, and looked directly at the audience. I want to tell you about my family, and I want to tell you the truth. The auditorium seemed to lean forward collectively. I could see parents and teachers paying closer attention, sensing that something important was about to happen. For a long time, I've been making up stories about my dad because I was embarrassed about the real reason he's not here. I told people he was a pilot, or that he traveled for work, or that he was in the military, but none of that was true, and I'm sorry for lying. I could feel the tension in the room shift. Some parents exchanged glances, but mostly I saw faces filled with attention and respect for this brave little boy. The truth is, my dad isn't here because he's in prison. He made some really bad choices and hurt my mom, and now he has to face the consequences for what he did. His voice never wavered, never broke. I was scared to tell people this because I thought they would think less of me or feel sorry for me. The silence in that auditorium was complete. You could have heard a pin drop. I saw Ms. Rodriguez with her hand over her heart and Principal Foster nodding encouragingly from the side of the stage. But my mom taught me that being honest is more important than being comfortable. She also taught me that what my dad did doesn't define who I am or what kind of person I'll become. Ethan looked directly at me then, and I saw such strength in his eyes that it took my breath away. My mom works really hard to take care of us. She's a nurse, and she helps people feel better when they're sick. She works night shifts so she can be here for me during the day. She's the strongest, most loving person I know, and I'm proud that she's my mom. I was crying now, but they were tears of pride and amazement. Our family might look different from yours, but it's full of love and honesty. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it's scary. He paused, then smiled. Thank you for listening. The auditorium erupted, not just polite applause, but genuine, heartfelt clapping. I watched as parents and teachers rose to their feet, giving my son a standing ovation. Children were clapping enthusiastically, and I could see several adults wiping away tears. As Ethan walked off the stage, his shoulders back and his head high, I realized that my little boy had just taught an entire room of adults what courage looked like. As the applause died down and Ethan made his way back to sit with his classmates, I sat in that auditorium chair completely overwhelmed by what had just happened. My 8-year-old son had just done something that I, as a grown woman, had been too afraid to do for over a year. He had told the truth with dignity and courage. But what happened next was even more unexpected than his speech. As parents and children began to file out of the auditorium, I was approached by a woman I'd seen around school but had never spoken to. She had tears in her eyes as she walked up to me. "I'm Rebecca Martinez, Tommy's mom," she said, extending her hand. I just wanted you to know that your son's courage today gave me chills. My husband walked out on us 2 years ago, and I've been making up excuses about why he doesn't come to school events. After listening to Ethan, I realize I might be doing my son a disservice by not being honest." Before I could respond, another parent joined us. "I'm David's dad, not the David you mentioned," he said with a gentle smile, "but I wanted to tell you that what your son did today was incredible. My brother struggles with addiction, and we've been hiding it from our kids. Maybe it's time we had some honest conversations at home, too." Over the next 20 minutes, I was approached by 7 different parents, each sharing their own family struggles and expressing admiration for Ethan's honesty. A single father dealing with his ex-wife's mental illness. A mother whose husband was deployed but couldn't tell people where. A grandmother raising her grandson whose parents were dealing with substance abuse. Ms. Rodriguez appeared at my elbow, her eyes bright with emotion. "Maya, I owe you and Ethan an apology. I was so focused on his behavior that I missed the real issue. He was protecting both of you the only way he knew how." Principal Foster joined our small group, shaking her head in amazement. In 23 years of education, I don't think I've ever seen a child display that level of maturity and courage. Ethan didn't just share his story today, he gave other children permission to be honest about their own families. The most beautiful part came when I finally reached Ethan, who was surrounded by a group of his classmates. Instead of the awkward silence or pitying looks I had feared, I heard Emma saying, "That was really brave, Ethan. My parents are divorced too, and sometimes I don't know what to tell people." Marcus chimed in, "My dad has PTSD from the Army, and sometimes he can't come to things because he gets really anxious around crowds." I never told anyone that before. I watched in amazement as these children, inspired by Ethan's honesty, began sharing their own family realities. The playground conversations that afternoon weren't about who had the coolest dad or the most perfect family. They were about understanding, acceptance, and the relief that comes from not having to pretend anymore. Over the following weeks, the changes in Ethan were remarkable. His grades improved, his confidence soared, and he developed deeper friendships than he'd ever had before. Children started seeking him out, not because they felt sorry for him, but because they recognized him as someone who would listen without judgment. The school implemented new programs about family diversity and created support groups for children dealing with various family challenges. Ms. Rodriguez told me that Ethan had become an unofficial peer counselor, helping other kids navigate difficult conversations about their own family situations. But perhaps the most profound change was in our relationship. The wall of lies that had been building between us crumbled completely, replaced by a foundation of honesty and trust that made us stronger than we'd ever been. 3 months later, as I sit in my car outside Lincoln Elementary, I realize that the lesson Ethan taught me that day extends far beyond our personal situation. We live in a world where everyone is trying to present the perfect image, where families feel pressure to hide their struggles, and children learn to be ashamed of circumstances beyond their control. What my son showed that auditorium full of people is that there's incredible power in authenticity. When we stop pretending and start being real, we don't just free ourselves. We give others permission to be free too. If you're a parent watching this and you're struggling with how much truth to share with your children, remember what I learned that day. Our kids are often stronger and more perceptive than we give them credit for. They can handle the truth when it's delivered with love, context, and reassurance. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they'll teach us what real courage looks like. The truth might be scary, but lies are exhausting, and in the end, authenticity will always be more powerful than perfection. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. I know it wasn't easy to hear, but I believe these are the conversations we need to be having. If Ethan's story resonated with you, or if you face similar challenges in your own family, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and sharing them might help another parent who's struggling with the same difficult decisions I faced. Maybe you're a single parent trying to figure out how to explain a difficult situation to your children. Maybe you're someone who grew up in a complex family and you understand what Ethan went through, or maybe you're a teacher or school administrator who works with families like ours every day. Whatever your perspective, Your voice adds value to this conversation. I want you to know that if you're currently in an abusive relationship, you're not alone. There are resources available to help you, and there are people who believe you and want to support you. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-79-923. Your safety and your children's safety matter. And if you're a parent who's been carrying the weight of protecting your children from difficult truths, I want you to remember that children are often more resilient than we think. Age-appropriate honesty, delivered with love and support, can be a gift rather than a burden. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps other people find these videos when they need them most. And if you think someone in your life could benefit from hearing Ethan's story, please share it with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that courage comes in small packages and that authenticity is always more powerful than perfection. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. I share real stories about real families navigating real challenges because I believe that when we stop pretending everything is perfect, we create space for genuine connection and healing. Thank you for being part of this community, for listening with open hearts, and for supporting families like mine who are just trying to do their best. Until next time, remember, your story matters. Your truth has power, and you're stronger than you know. I'll see you in the next video.